if you can find a way to make the acting internal, it's going to appear more natural, even with the people who don't want to rehearse. It's going to be more natural because you're making it an internal process rather than an external process.
Welcome back to You're a Storyteller. Today, we pick up where we left off. Part 2 of our 2-part Q&A with Brian McDonald and our very own Ian Ebright.
Let's move on to our second sort of category where we've couched these questions under directing or visual collaboration, and I will share a little bit more about you. We mentioned Whiteface earlier, that you wrote and directed the short, bought by HBO and Cinemax, and has been used by corporations as a diversity training tool. Brian, you also directed the documentary short Flickering Memories, which was actually commissioned by SIF, which not many people can say. Directed a documentary short for MTV and have directed online content for Visa. We got another question from Sway Molina that I like because he gets right into this idea of collaboration. And his question is, film is all about collaboration. As someone who strongly believes in approaching a story the invisible ink way, your book, Brian, how do you deal with writers and creators of all sorts who've been trained differently into developing an idea? So it sounds like he's getting at if you're in an environment where, you're on a team of writers, or maybe it's like who knows?
Well, sometimes you can't. I mean, that's not a good answer, but it's the truth. There's an interesting thing I've noticed, that if you are, I won't say the smartest person in the room, but if you're the most knowledgeable person in the room, there's no actual difference between being that person and being the least knowledgeable person in the room in terms of the way people respond. Because if you're the odd one out, well, we all agree on this dumb idea, right? You look like an idiot.
Right.
Yeah. And so sometimes you can't reconcile that, right? They all want to do this thing.
There are now other dynamics at play.
Right, yeah. Because I understand, we have this idea of the majority rules, and that makes sense. It's fair.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that all those people are right, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we all think the earth is flat, and you go, I think it's round. It's like, well, that guy's an idiot, right? That's the way it works. So often what you have to do is, if you're in charge of that group, you have to just say, this is the compass we're using. So just as what if you happen to be, if you're not in charge, there's not much you can do.
Yeah.
But if it's your piece and it's your film or whatever, and you're the director and then you can make that happen. And you just have to make sure they understand where you're coming from and that they follow the rules you've set up, which is true anyway.
Right.
Which is always going to be true.
Yeah.
But if you can get people on your team, and eventually people will get swayed if they see that what you're doing is working. Oh, that is a good way to think of it. I didn't think of that way. But they sort of have to see it. It has to be proven to them often before they can get on board. So I don't know. I will say it's much easier to collaborate. I mean, we do things here, and I've worked at some pretty high level places.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that we can get consensus much faster than most places, and we can get to a good place, and a pretty good place pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because we're using the same logic.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy. And you're right.
Yeah. And egos aren't involved. It's a very fascinating thing. Nobody's ego is I don't think that's working because it's not with our armature. Oh, right, that makes sense. Maybe this, maybe that. And we're just looking for the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
We're not looking to get our idea in or to shut somebody else out, right? We're just looking for a solution to the problem, and we're all following the same compass.
Right.
So it works really well.
That is, this is something you and I have talked about that is really another one of those troubling things in terms of where we're focused, where my films have played a lot of festivals, so I go to these. Sometimes I watch Q&As, sometimes I'm on them, and I'm always amazed at the questions and the answers from audience and filmmakers. Where did you shoot? How'd you get that cool actor? It's all about the spectacle.
Right.
And I feel like from the indie film realm on up to as big as you can get, it's not a comment on raw talent, it's a comment on focus. In that I just rarely hear people talking from a place of craft when it comes to storytelling.
Yeah, they seldom do.
Right. And so back to this question of like, how do you reconcile that? That's going to be very difficult if you're not on a team. This is to your point about belief agency, right? If you're not on a team of people who are doing two things, committed to the craft and then aware of their audience. And I feel like we'll also talk about this in a few minutes, but you've made this great point about the classics of, yesteryear, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
The focus was on the audience, and it really feels like nowadays that the focus is on how do I differentiate myself as a filmmaker or storyteller?
Yeah.
How do I do that with spectacle or a twist or with a cool sequence or shot?
Mm-hmm.
Because those things get written about a certain way, or they often pass for good storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the focus is on me, right? How am I going to differentiate myself? And second part of that, I'm not going to follow the craft.
Right.
I'm going to like feel my way through this thing.
Right.
Jesse says this when you guys do this show, right? This is a temptation, I think, for any aspiring storyteller of like, let me trust this cool mystical gut vibe I have. You also hear this in Q&As of people that kind of play it close to the vest. Like they have this mystical kind of understanding because they've ascended to a certain level as a storyteller, filmmaker. I think in terms of answering that question, it gets very hard when your team is not working for the audience, but is working for themselves in the sense of how do we look a certain way in terms of ego or something. Mm-hmm. And it's just not about craft. It's about any number of things that can substitute for craft. You know what I mean? Spectacle or polish or
right.
And I'm always amazed, with this ocean of content that we have across like the internet and all these streaming things. It's like it's funny because none of this stuff, if you end up doing what it is that so many people do, which is the cool shot or the polish or something just for the sake of itself, it is immediately absorbed into this ocean of noise that we already have.
Right.
The only way to distinguish yourself nowadays is storytelling. Mm-hmm. This old sort of quaint thing that we want to dismiss because it's not about my ego.
Right. Well, yeah, there's a lot of that. It's how do I show off, right?
Right.
How many plates can I spin, right?
Yeah.
And show off that I'm spinning plates. Look at me spin plates.
Yeah.
So
you can get noticed that way really fast.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of look at me direct, look at me write, look at me edit, look at me write, watch me do my thing.
Right.
Right? And so an editor will have a lot of cuts. So you can see they're cutting, and a director will move the camera around a lot so you can see that they're there. It's almost like everybody wants to say, look at me, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here.
Right.
Don't forget I'm here. Right?
Yeah.
Which is not the same thing as forget that I'm here and get absorbed in the story.
Yeah. This is a great point of yours of like the best directors adapt their style to the needs of the story.
Right.
So it's not about my stamp, my stamp, my stamp across all genres that they have happened to cover.
Right.
But they're almost becoming a chameleon in service of story.
Yeah, but that happens less and less, right?
Right.
So,
totally.
So since starting a little bit before MTV showed up, but basically since MTV showed up, MTV was all about the aesthetics, right? So MTV used to show nothing but music videos. That's what they did.
Right.
And when that happened, there were some beautiful things that they made, that they produced, and it was all about style.
Right.
The songs maybe had substance, some of them, right? Mm-hmm. But the visuals were just, eye candy.
Yeah.
And those people had such an impact that way that they started getting directing jobs in feature films without any understanding of story or drama. So then directing became about how things look. When you talk to people about directors that they like, they're usually talking about the way things look. I like Tim Burton. Why? Because I like the way his stuff looks.
I like the flair.
Right.
He's got a visual flair.
Right. And you can say that about almost any director.
Right.
It's about what their stuff looks like.
Right. That's a big shift.
That's a huge shift. Yeah. And so, and it's not about how they get really good performances or, a director like Sidney Lumet was all about the style being dictated by the story itself, right? When he did 12 Angry Men, he made certain stylistic choices based on what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So here he has a movie that takes place pretty much all of it in a jury deliberation in a room. And he started, he had a lens strategy is one of the things he did, where he started with a wide lens so that the room was big and spacious. Mm-hmm. and then longer lenses so that things started to compress over time as things got tense. So he shrunk the room. Right? You can feel it, you can't see it. Yeah.
Serving the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is a style, but it's not there to be noticed.
Right.
It's there to be felt.
Yeah.
And now everybody, again, they want to be noticed. So they don't do things to be felt. They do them to be noticed. I mean, if it's to be felt, it's to be felt in the most superficial way. Whoa, look at that.
Spectacle.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a whole nother episode that we'll do.
It is.
Got another question for you. This is a question of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I like really one of my favorite directors is Bennett Miller. He's done Moneyball, Capote. I'm now blanking Foxcatcher, and he and his casting director get these supporting roles that feel like it amazes me. It feels like people who are not actors by trade. Mm-hmm. And he develops these scenes where there's this, people in a room and this interplay and chit chat and chatter, and just the life and sort of the cadence of the whole thing is incredible to me. Mm-hmm. For the directors that are watching this, how do you achieve that sort of organic, realistic feeling when you often have, back to that earlier question, two disciplines from actors? One is, let's rehearse. Mm-hmm. And the other is, let's not rehearse. It's going to kill the spontaneity.
Right.
How do you sort of reconcile those differences and respect those differences while trying to arrive at a scene that feels really alive, rather than sort of the indie tendency of, I'm waiting on you to complete my lines and now I'll deliver my lines, which is not how conversation happens.
It's not how it happens. There are a couple of things. One is that what you're talking about, that style, was a big deal in the 70s. You'll see it a lot in 70s films. There's even a lot of it in Jaws, which is a big old summer blockbuster, but has a lot of that feeling in it. But it was a thing in the 70s to do that. Even Star Wars has it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, right.
That was the style of the day. And often it came out of, a lot of times they would hire people who weren't actors.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. They used to do that a lot more. So, like, I'll cast somebody who's not an actor.
Yeah.
And so they would just be there's people in Jaws who aren't actors, who have lines and stuff. And they're not actors. So that adds a certain...
It totally does.
Reality. And also that makes the actors act differently. Because they're acting with... The trained actors are acting with somebody who's not an actor. And so that changes how they perform. It actually brings, I think, their performance to a more realistic level.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Because if they're a good actor,
right,
they're just listening and responding. Mm-hmm. So if that person is speaking to me in a more realistic way and not a performy way,
right,
my performance is going to change, right?
right. Yeah.
And so, some like Marlon Brando was very good at acting, sort of being sort of natural. So he would do things like, there's one movie where there was an actress who wasn't very experienced, and so he asked the director to roll camera, and he just had a conversation with her, and then he just started saying the lines in the middle of the conversation, and she responded naturally, and that's how he helped her performance.
Amazing.
So there are tricks you can do to get people to give a more natural performance. Most directors don't study working with actors. That's part of the problem. So, and actors get very good at acting poorly. And I mean, because what the director is asking them often to do is to show me something. So what a director is often saying is, an inexperienced director or not a very good director is, show me sadness or show me anger. So actors get very good at showing the director anger, and which is overacting. Right? I don't even know what anger looks like, right? If I say show me anger, what does that even look like? Right. So, but directors do that all the time.
Yeah.
So it's result directing, it's called. So they'll do that. They want a result, right? So maybe they want somebody to scream, right, at another actor, but they'll say you're not angry enough. Be angrier. But the director's or the actor's idea of anger might be something completely different, right? Because anger can look so many ways.
Yeah, good point.
Right?
Right.
Anger looks like a lot of things.
Yeah, right.
Right? And people smile when they're angry sometimes. Sometimes they're very quiet when they're angry.
Yeah.
Sometimes more articulate. I don't know how many times I have to tell you. Right. So it can look a lot of ways. So you say be angrier. It doesn't mean anything. So one of the things you have to learn how to do.
It's like code for emote. Emote strongly.
Yeah.
Which is very...
Right. And so it makes the acting external rather than internal. Right. So if you can find a way to make the acting internal, it's going to appear more natural, even with the people who don't want to rehearse. It's going to be more natural because you're making it an internal process rather than an external process.
That's helpful.
Right.
Okay. So regardless of if we open with a rehearsal or if the actor's like, I can't do any of that, we got to just go.
Yeah.
The goal for the director is just to work to coach the sort of internal directions.
Right.
Rather than, paste this on the wall for me.
Right.
Show me happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can give a surface note that ends up being an internal thing. So I'm trying to think of an example of that. Well, there's a scene in Sideways, and I'm trying to remember exactly. But anyway, in the scene, a guy is talking to his ex-wife, and he's finding out that she's getting married, and he's devastated by this news. But
this is like my favorite comedy of all time.
Okay,
so I'm all ears.
So Alexander Payne, though, told the actor, I can't think of his name. You know what I'm talking about?
Paul Giamatti.
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
Told Paul Giamatti just to smile through the whole scene. So that creates a certain just smile through the whole scene.
That scene is so good.
Right. It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking because he's smiling.
Because he's smiling.
Yeah.
Right.
If he were frowning, it would be stupid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The smile makes it hurt.
The smile makes it hurt. He's trying to be he's trying to put on a good face.
He works himself up to be pleasant because she's there, ex-wife with a new husband.
Right.
So he gets there and kills it, which we're all surprised. And then it's, let's go toast the new bride and groom. She's like, I'm not drinking. And he's like, not drinking. Early in the movie, he's going on about her palate for wine. And then she's like, I'm pregnant. And that's the moment where it's like it takes the hammer.
Right.
But he smiles through it. And it's like, that makes it so much more devastating.
Right. And so that's a surface.
Right.
That's a surface direction, right?
Yeah.
Smile.
But it's more precise than emotion A, emotion B.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because by that point in the movie, Paul Giamatti understands what the character's feeling.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But he's just not showing it outwardly,
That's
right?
Seen,
so it's really nice. So that's an external direction that could be but you could say, somebody might say, whatever you do, don't show her how you feel. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Totally.
It's an internal thing.
It has to be internalized.
Right.
Like that can't be pasted on the surface. It's not an expressive thing.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing directors make the mistake of is pre-visualizing what a scene should look like in terms of the acting.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Right. So that's what happens. They're trying to match a picture in their head.
Yeah.
In my mind, there was a pause here. There was a thing here. And so they get into this micromanaging with the actors.
That sounds like the kiss of death right there.
Right. Because it's too much to keep in your head as an actor, right? Do this, hit this mark, blah, blah, blah. Right. All these things they got to remember, right? So...
And, trust actors to find the holes if you are a writer-director.
Yeah.
Trust them to find the holes that you may not have. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about working with actors is they're like, did this occur to you? It didn't.
Right.
I was thinking bigger. I'm glad you're here.
Right.
Help me get this to you are the person who's going to know in some ways a more authentic place because we're beholden to different things.
Right. I never let an actor tell me what they're going to do. Don't tell me.
Yeah.
If you tell me what you're going to do, Like I had an actor one time on Whiteface. He said, I was thinking I would respond this way when the guy does this. I go, first of all, two things. First of all, how do you know ahead of time how you're going to respond?
Yeah.
Right? So listen to that other actor and respond accordingly.
Yeah.
Don't know ahead of time. And also, don't tell me your idea, because if I don't visualize it the way you're telling me, if I don't visualize it correctly, I'll say no to a good idea.
Right.
So
that's a
just
great point.
do your thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We can shoot it again. So just do your thing.
Right.
And all I'm trying to do when I'm directing is be the first audience. All I'm doing is I'm sitting there.
That's a good way to say that.
Yeah, I'm the first audience. So do your thing, and I'm going to try to believe it here.
Right.
And if I don't believe it, I'll make an adjustment. And if I believe what's happening is really happening, then my note is not going to help.
Yeah, right.
Right? So stay out of the way.
Yeah.
Unless you're needed.
Yeah.
If you're not needed, shut up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can make just the smallest adjustment. Sometimes you just add a prop to a scene, and that changes the scene. There was a scene in a sitcom, old sitcom from the 70s. Doesn't matter what it was. But these two women were having a conversation, and the scene was sort of dead. Mm-hmm. And the director gave them a carton of ice cream that was frozen and said, okay, I want you to eat this ice cream while this is happening. And so they're doing the scene, and as they do the scene, they're trying to, and the whole scene comes alive because of this ice cream as they wrestle with trying to get the ice cream out of here. And it just changed the scene. So sometimes it's like, but then they're also acting, there's an internal thing that's happening because they're wrestling with this ice cream. And it takes, in a way, their mind off of their lines.
This is where I like where you're going from that and the example with the non-actors of like get whatever you can do to sort of subtly help your actor not be self-conscious. So one, not asking for them to emote.
Right.
But also being precise and creating environments where they feel safe and that this is sort of this organic internalized thing, whether we're rehearsing or not.
Right.
It's like removing that tendency to sort of pull out the mask, put on the...
Yeah, start acting now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So funny, I have another friend, Brian, and I don't remember what the first movie was. I think it was Eyes Wide Shut. Mm-hmm. But I like Sidney Pollack as a director, and I remember him and I arguing, and I'm like, he was like, how good was he in Eyes Wide Shut? How good was... Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm in my 20s at the time or something, or barely 20s.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I didn't see... He's not acting. And the older I got, I've shared this with you, like he's one of those that I wish I would have been younger to sort of discover him as he was doing his.
Yeah.
I can do it now.
Yeah, you can.
But I got to him late, and like he was one of those guys, like the more I watched him direct and act, I was like, his acting is like, I don't see it.
Yeah, no, you can't see it.
And it's incredible.
He told a story once about what he used to watch Candid Camera, the show Candid Camera.
Okay, yeah.
And Candid Camera, for people who may not know, was a hidden camera, the first hidden camera show.
Right.
Right? It was actually on the radio first, I think. It was hidden like microphone or something. But anyway, but it was like a prank show.
Yeah.
It was the first one.
Yeah.
I still like it if I see it. It's not mean-spirited. Some of the later shows got more mean-spirited. Right. It's like, we got you. Yeah. But this was
like
different.
how do we humiliate kind of thing.
Yeah. But anyway, there's one episode, I think from the 60s, early 60s or something. And they found a gas station. And Sidney Pollack, I've seen this episode, but Sidney Pollack was talking about this episode. So they find a gas station, and the gas station is sort of at the bottom. There's a hill, and it's sort of near the bottom of this hill. So they took an engine out of a car, and they coasted. The car coasted down the hill as if it was pulling into this gas station. And the woman says, she says to the attendant, "There's something wrong with my car. Can you check?"
Yeah.
And he opens the hood of the car. He looks at her. He looks, because he's trying to process, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Sidney Pollack said something really interesting. He goes, "No, when I say that guy did nothing, he did nothing." And Sidney Pollack took that lesson and was like, "Don't do anything."
That's amazing.
Yeah, because all that was happening, I don't know if you've ever seen anything that is kind of unexplainable, but it's a weird process.
Right.
Because your brain is like,
You short circuit.
Well, it's going through a checklist.
Yeah.
A car can't drive without an engine,
but from like an outside observer, it looks like you just power down something.
Yeah.
It's not sort of this grand like gasp.
Yeah, no,
you know what I mean?
It's not. In the movies, it often is, right? But in life, that's not the way things work.
Yeah, right.
He actually, Sidney Pollack does a great job in Death Becomes Her. And he's examining Meryl Streep. I think it's Meryl Streep he's examining. I'm pretty sure it is. And she's dead, but he's a doctor. And so she doesn't have a pulse and a heartbeat. And you see this guy kind of break down as he realizes she can't be sitting here talking to me. And he doesn't show it to her. He's not showing it to her. So he's trying to maintain. But he's like, okay, no heartbeat. Okay. It's really, really nicely done. It's really good. It's really good. And it's invisible. He's not acting, but it's real. You believe that guy's really examining somebody and really see. I'm sure he drew on that engine. It's the same thing.
Yeah, right.
Right. I'm sure he drew on that attendant.
Do nothing. No, it's great. In the instance, this was my follow-up question. In the instance where you're working with actors who believe, maybe because they've been poorly directed, or because it's sort of an assumption or something, that their job is to emote and over-emote, and being what I think you and I would agree is important to create that sort of safe, creative, collaborative space. Do you have any tips for people that are directors that are trying to help walk their actors back from a place of over-emoting? If those directions aren't coming from them, if that's coming, if the actor kind of shows up with that tendency.
You have to find a way to take the attention off of themselves. So there's a couple ways you can do that. Verbs are good. So if you have a verb, I learned this from the only directing teacher I had was a woman named Judith Weston, who's a great teacher. And she uses verbs and talks about verbs. So if you say to somebody, what I want you to do in this scene, you give them a verb. You say, I want you to punish that person. So everything they say, this is underneath. I'm punishing you.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is underneath. So that takes the focus off of the performance and puts it out.
Right.
And you'll get a more subtle performance because it'll be directed towards the other actor.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Right?
Yeah, and it sort of clarifies how that dialogue is going to be interpreted.
Right.
Then it's not about necessarily sort of markers, right?
Right.
Dialogue beats,
right,
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it gives you a through line.
Yeah.
To drive on all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Seduce is a big one.
Right.
Like seduce this person. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's, a sexual seduction, but it can it
could be in a business like conference room or something of like win the argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but do it seductively.
Yeah. Those kinds of things.
Okay.
So that helps a lot.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah. So, and sometimes it's, boy, there are some people who are really good. John Huston was really good at giving direction. When he made The African Queen with Katharine Hepburn, she couldn't figure out how to play the character she was playing. And she struggled with it for a couple of days. And I guess he just came up to her one day and said, Eleanor Roosevelt. So if you don't know who Eleanor Roosevelt is, some people don't. Some people don't. But
we're big fans of her in our house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some people don't, but it doesn't matter. She was a very famous person.
Yeah.
And First Lady. But she had a certain character and a certain personality.
Yeah.
And a certain way of being in the world.
Right.
And all he said to her was that, Eleanor Roosevelt. And she goes, oh, then I got it. Then I could play the part.
Wow.
He also gave Eli Wallach, another direct actor, he gave him direction once. Eli Wallach said, I was in this scene, and I think it was Misfits, the movie. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he was being drunk. He goes, I was being drunk. I was drunk in this scene. And so he's doing that, and then a light blew or something, and they had to wait for, whatever, between takes. They were waiting. And John Huston didn't say anything about the performance. He just said, the drunkest I ever was in my life? And Eli Wallach's like, no. And he goes, yesterday. Yesterday I was the drunkest I've ever been in my life. And he kind of wandered off, and Eli Wallach was like, that's weird. He didn't seem drunk yesterday. And he was like, oh, don't be so drunk. Like, he's telling me, don't be so drunk. Right? Like,
this gets back to your do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't be so drunk. Right?
Yeah.
Like, Charlie Chaplin got famous for playing a guy who was drunk. Mm-hmm. Like, on stage, he did it. And his father was an alcoholic, so he observed a lot of that behavior. And what he found was that people who were drunk spent a lot of energy trying not to be drunk. So
Interesting.
Yeah. So they try to be dignified, and they try to hold themselves up, and they try to right. They don't do this.
Yeah, this is Giamatti hiding the pain with a smile.
Right.
It's like it's the opposite of
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Right. People who are drunk try to walk straight.
Right.
So straight. Right. Right.
Not kind of slosh.
Right. Yeah.
Totally.
So anyway, I forgot what my point was, but
that's good. I mean, that's to the directors who might be working with people, actors who have a tendency to over emote.
Yeah.
That it's give them offer verbs.
Yeah.
And try to get them focused on sort of that internal delivery.
Yeah.
Rather than just some tacked on external.
Yeah. And just try to sit there and watch the takes and see if you believe them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
See if you believe, is this really happening? Do I believe this is really happening?
Yeah.
Do the actors believe it's really happening?
Right.
I was directing a scene once where an actress stops the scene, and she said, well, she didn't stop, but when it was over, she goes, I didn't believe what he was saying to me. And I'm like, well then, because she was supposed to run off with him to a hotel, and she didn't believe the guy.
Yeah, good feedback.
Yeah, I was like, okay, let's fix that. So you do believe it, right?
Right. I need you to believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of directors want to be directors because they know camera equipment, or because they
totally.
So they don't focus on getting performances.
Yeah.
That's secondary.
Right.
And that can be a problem. Before, directors would come out of the theater, or they would be writers or something, and they would think more about performance, or thought about it in a different way. And a lot of directors think of performers as just carrying out their vision, right? Instead of being collaborators.
Execute this for me.
Just do the thing.
Yeah.
Dance, monkey, dance.
Right.
Right. But
that's helpful.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, we're to our last section of questions, personal questions. Last little bit of bio on you. Your books, The Golden Theme and Invisible Ink, have been cited by filmmakers and storytellers, including Paul Feig. Did I get his last name right?
Yeah. Paul Feig.
Director of Freaks and Geeks, Bridesmaids. Jim Taylor, who was co-screenwriter, won an Academy Award for Sideways, which we've been talking about, and Election. Jim Oles, the screenwriter of Fight Club, and Andrew Stanton, director of Finding Nemo and WALL-E. Brian, you teach at kind of a serious list here: Pixar, Sony, Disney, Cirque du Soleil, Industrial Light and Magic, and locally you've taught everywhere from film school to NIFTY, Northwest Film Forum, University of Washington, and continue to work with the Red Badge Project, which is an organization that you work with, and Tom Skerritt, to teach vets with PTSD how to tell their stories as a means to heal, which is pretty incredible. So a couple personal questions, and we'll call it an episode.
Okay.
We have one from Twitter from Nadia K. She would like to know who you consider to be your greatest mentor and your proudest moment.
Well, greatest mentor is an interesting question, because I always tell people that you can have virtual mentors, right? So my virtual mentor is Rod Serling. Rod Serling died when I was 10, so
we're going to talk about him more in a minute.
Okay, so we never had a time to chance to meet up,
right?
But I would say that he's probably the single biggest early influence on my work and the way that I think about stories and how they work.
Yeah.
In a different way than a lot of people who are very interested in his twist endings and because he did the Twilight Zone. his pre-Twilight Zone work. I'm a big fan of his pre-Twilight Zone work, which didn't have any of that stuff. There's just something about how he thought about the work that guided me in a particular way.
Yeah.
He had certain weaknesses which he acknowledged.
That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, that I see. You know.
Yeah.
But mostly it's in his dialogue because all the characters sound just like him.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
Actually, now that you mention it,
Yeah.
that's very true.
Yeah, it is true. But he would have said that. And probably would have worked on it. It was something he struggled with. And all writers have something they struggle with.
Yeah.
That was his thing.
Yeah.
He struggled with, but at least he struggled with it.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Gets back to this earlier thing we're talking about, like sort of embracing, working with the critic throughout the process, hopefully.
Yeah. But I would say this. All his characters sounded the same. He used to have his cadence. He had a way of speaking.
Yeah.
But they didn't all come from the same place. Like they had different motivations and they were clearly different people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who write, who are so focused on dialogue, often don't write different people.
Right. Patterns is a great example of that. So this is pre-Twilight Zone, right?
Patterns is the first thing that he did that hit.
Yeah.
I think that was 55 or something, 54, something like that.
Right. And the antagonist of that the whole time is like the clear antagonist. And I may be reading this wrong, but by the end, it kind of complicated it. Because, I mean, in a way, like the protagonist...
Do you want to say something about the story so that people know what we're talking about?
We should probably do that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to tee it up better than I am.
No, I'm not. You just watched it.
So it's about a businessman who's brought into a huge sort of New York conglomerate from out of town. And he doesn't know that he's essentially been hired to replace a VP who's still there. It's got like a lot of echoes of stuff that's come since, of like Margin Call that I mentioned from Chandor and The Firm and this kind of thing. Like this story has been done since then many different ways, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really about the protagonist's struggle to reconcile this new position. He has a wife who's kind of leaning on him, like, well, we're here, and like this is your thing. And he has like moral misgivings about like, I can't
replace this guy.
Yeah, like you know, this guy and I worked on this thing together, and like, and the antagonist of the whole thing is like, no, you didn't. I know his crap, and your stuff is good. This is why you're here. And by the end, I was kind of conflicted of like, okay, so the protagonist had an arc to where he's found a third way, which is not sort of be the lackey of the antagonist, and it's not quit. It's a third thing. Like he goes toe to toe with him, and he's like, I'm going to be on you. I'm going to be your conscience from here on out.
Yeah.
It's going to be contentious.
Right.
And here's the way it's going to work. Because I'm not going to watch you do to me and everybody else what you did to the guy, the VP you just sacked. But then what's weird is the antagonist is like, great. This is why you're here.
Well,
it makes me feel complicated because it's like the whole time I'm like, well, clearly, I mean, the antagonist is awful. But by the end, they're they're coming from very, very different places. But he sells those two places he sells it well. Where at least I was a little conflicted by the end of like, oh, I need to rethink a little bit. This guy is a little less two-dimensional as an antagonist than I thought by the end.
Yeah. Well, he was good at that. But yeah. I think that's a good read on it. Yeah, so that's a good example. When he did Patterns, when Rod Serling did Patterns, it's a good example of somebody trying to follow their success. He had a really hard time following Patterns.
Interesting.
Yeah, Patterns was a huge hit for him. He won an Emmy, and it was a big deal. And he didn't think he could top it. He kept writing things, and things got produced, but he didn't think he could top it.
Wow.
And then he did Requiem for a Heavyweight, and then he was in. But it took a long time.
Interesting.
Relatively speaking, it took a long time for him to catch fire again. He thought, maybe I just have the one. Maybe that's all I've got.
Wow.
Yeah.
While we're on it, because it's a question from another person in our community, favorite Twilight Zone episode, and then I will circle back around.
Did I answer that question?
You answered mentor.
I still have another question.
Proudest moment.
Well, no, I said virtual mentor because I have an actual mentor.
Right.
So Rod Serling was my virtual mentor.
Yeah. Most kind of influential, especially early on for you.
Especially early on. Other people, Billy Wilder and whatever, come later. But actual mentor is a guy named Bruce Walters. And when I was a teenager, I went to visit his office. He was did motion graphics. And I went to visit his office because I I looked up in the phone book motion pictures, and I called everybody.
That's so cool.
I called everybody
Yeah.
and said, hey, can I come visit and see what you do? And pretty much everybody said yes. So I visited everybody who had anything to do with movies in town, and found this guy, and he liked me, and said, hey, come on after school, hang out. So I did. I would go there after school and help him
Wow.
with commercials and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because my career's actually longer. Like, my career's almost as old as I am, because I started with him when I was 13.
Wow.
Right.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, I start counting when I'm 21, because it sounds like, how could you be in this almost?
Yeah. You were in it for like years before that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, so he was unbelievably influential.
How so?
Well, first of all, I hated school. I was dyslexic. Had a horrible time at school. Hated being there. He gave me a place to be. He made me feel good about who I was and what I knew.
Wow.
It was the one place where I felt like, I'm not an idiot. He would literally, he'd be working on a pitch for some big client for a commercial idea.
Yeah.
And he would listen to my ideas, a 13-year-old kid, as if I was just a peer. And he listened to them, and sometimes he took them and said, that's a good
Wow.
idea, I'm going to pitch that. Not only that, and I'd be proud, and that was it. I thought that was going to be, but when the client would say, oh, that's really good, I think we should do that, he would say, well, Brian thought that up. He would always give me credit. And he wasn't nice to me to be nice. He would say, no, I don't like that idea, when he didn't like an idea.
Wow.
So it wasn't like he was just always about building my ego up. It was like, no, I'm going to treat you like a real collaborator, and sometimes you're not going to have good ideas. But he was always good to me when he thought I did have good ideas. And so I worked with him for years after school. It was my first job ever. And then he ended up getting hired by Industrial Light and Magic and heading up the animation department there at ILM.
Yeah.
And I didn't follow him there, but I would go visit him there from time to time. So he got hired in '84. So he was working on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom,
Man.
and the Back to the Future and stuff like that when I got there. So I would go watch him work on that stuff.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I would stay with him, and he would have all these screenplays and storyboards at his house.
Yeah.
And he'd say, well, you can read the script. So Cocoon was getting made when I was there, and he goes, well, you can read the script, So I read the script to the movie Cocoon and
Holy
saw the
cow.
storyboards and stuff because he just had them at his house.
Yeah.
And
how powerful that must have been to, like you said, it's not the let me do you a favor, kid, right?
Yeah, no.
Or it's not just kind of crapping on you needlessly, right?
No.
It's this weird third way of like, okay, I'm going to give you a shot.
Yeah. And so I learned a ton from him.
Right.
I didn't learn. I learned more than he thought he was teaching me. I learned what it was like to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
I learned he never pretended to know things he didn't know. He trusted his gut. Sometimes we would get a job and he wasn't sure how we were going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do that. But he trusted himself, and he trusted that he could do it. And so I learned that from him. There's a ton of stuff I learned from him.
Yeah, that's all like equally important, right? As the nuts and bolts of storytelling.
Yeah, and I learned how to learn too. Like he observed things. So like sometimes we would do a motion graphic thing where we had to imitate. Neon was big in the 80s, so we would do like these things that look like neon. So you'd have to look at neon and go, what does neon do? Well, it's kind of brighter in the middle, and it kind of, and so it's like just observe things, look at things. Or we'd have to do a fake sunset. Well, what does a sunset look like? Well, it looks like this, and so it's like, oh, just go look at stuff.
So he got you paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had it in me.
Right.
I can't say that. I think that's one of the things that made him invite me in. But he certainly made it. He sort of normalized it. Yeah, that's what you do.
And creates that safe space of like, I'll give you a place at the table. If your idea is good, it will survive.
Yeah.
If it's not good, I'll let you know. But like, you're kind of welcome to actually pay attention.
Yeah.
Versus, you spoke about dyslexia, but a lot of environments where it's like if you're looking from the outside, you don't feel safe to take those risks. A lot of times, I would.
Yeah. So and like I say, I got to go to ILM when I was a kid and hang out, and
that's amazing.
Yeah, and go through stuff like what's in this box,
Right.
It's like
just opening boxes to ILM.
Oh, yeah,
just
and then
in there.
I was like, oh, there's Han Solo and carbonite, and there's it was like it's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's a good one. I think we missed one. We got a proudest moment.
Oh.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't know. That's tough. That's tough.
Maybe it's TBD.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of them. But also maybe I don't think of them that way.
Yeah.
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 There are some achievements. I will say this. An achievement I'm really proud of is winning Slam Dance. And the reason I'm proud of it is because I had semifinaled with a script 6 years earlier. And you semifinal, you're not going to win because you semifinal. But, I've written it with a friend, and we go to the ceremony and we see everybody win their awards. And I remember James L. Brooks was there that year, and I love James L. Brooks. He's a really great writer. And,
yeah, me too.
And so he was there, and so I got to see him. I was like, James L. Brooks, But my friend was a little like, man, everybody's winning awards, and he was a little, disgruntled.
Yeah. You guys got close.
But the trophy is beautiful. The trophy for the Austin Film Festival is beautiful. It's a beautiful trophy. It's like a typewriter it's crazy. It's beautiful. And
is this Slam Dance or Austin?
This is Austin.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Did I say Slam Dance?
You might have said Slam Dance.
Okay, I meant Austin.
Okay,
Slam Dance is fine too. Don't get me wrong.
Slam Dance is great.
But it was the Austin Film Festival. And so somebody won, and after the ceremony, there was two women, and they were accepting the award for their mother who couldn't be there. And so, but they had this trophy. They're walking around with this trophy, and it's just so gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I said, can I hold the trophy? And they were like, sure. And my friend didn't want to hold it. You want to hold the trophy? He's like, no, I don't want to hold it. And I'm like,
at that point.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I want to hold the trophy. And I held it, and I'm like, I want one of these. I'm getting one of these. I'm coming back, and I'm getting one. So it took me 6 years, but I got one. And so that trophy doesn't mean to me that I won. It means that I set a goal for myself, and I got it.
Yeah.
The trophy means more to me than the trophy.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, completely.
And so it's a symbol of what I can accomplish if I put my mind to accomplishing it.
Yeah.
So that's what, it's not like by luck it's like I set out to win that trophy.
And you did.
Yeah.
That's a great moment.
Yeah. And Sydney Pollack was in the audience.
No, see, don't be throwing it.
No, Sydney Pollack was in the audience when I won. Because Sydney Pollack won too, like a special one.
Oh.
So he had the same trophy.
It hurts.
So we have the same trophy.
Yeah,
so
it hurts.
I feel good about that. I think that if I won an Oscar or something, I don't think it would be the same as that. That award, that was a big deal for me.
That's a great story.
Yeah, so.
With the Sydney Pollack icing on the cake.
I couldn't have been happier. He was sitting right there. Yeah.
Do you know, another question, and we're just near wrapping it up. Do you know your favorite Twilight episode? This is from Nadia K. I don't
know if I have a favorite Twilight Zone. I have a few. I could just go down a list of several.
Give us a couple.
I like Nothing in the Dark. Mm-hmm. I like Number 12 Looks Just Like You. Mm. I Shot an Arrow into the Air.
His titles were so great.
Yeah. I like Nick of Time. I like It's a Good Life.
Yeah.
I like there's several. People Are Alike All Over. I like The Little People. I like.
I love that like.
Oh yeah.
You know, like a good dozen of these that stand out for you.
The Trade-ins I like a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did Rod Serling? Did he write all of these, or
he didn't write all of them?
Okay.
He didn't write all of them.
He wrote the majority.
He wrote most of them.
Yeah.
But he didn't write Nothing in the Dark, which is one of my favorites. He didn't write that. I think George Clayton Johnson wrote that one.
Yeah.
But he wrote most of them. He probably, I think, wrote most of the ones I mentioned.
Good list.
Yeah.
And I know how we're supposed to like do or not do with, companies and stuff, but all this stuff is streaming on certain streaming services. People want to find this stuff for free. You probably have the subscription already.
Yeah, they can find it.
They can find it.
And
it's kind of amazing. I mean, he did, how many seasons was it?
5 seasons, I think.
Yeah. So a lot of like really good, talk about, this gets back to your point on just theme, focus, like dramatizing the armature the whole way through. These are amazing.
Yeah, they are.
Study examples of that.
They're the easiest things to study in a lot of ways because they're short, especially the hour ones are not as good as the half-hour ones, and I think Rod certainly would say that.
Interesting.
But the half-hour ones are great for studying because they have a point, most of them, and they go right there, and you can watch them over and over again and learn how to stay on point.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Last question, and we'll wrap it up. You mentioned dyslexia, and I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were diagnosed at 20. Is that right? I
was never diagnosed.
Oh.
I just figured it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I just figured it out. Somebody said it once to me in school that they thought I had a language learning disability, and that just sounded awful, and I didn't want to be that person. And so, but then, yeah. So I was never been diagnosed.
But it was like...
But it's clear. Like it's not
clear to you.
Yeah, it's not a...
Yeah.
It's not... I'm not guessing.
yeah, totally. Yeah. All the pieces fit.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I turned 40 this year, and I was diagnosed this year with ADD, which was like furthest thing from my radar ever. Of all the stuff, I would be like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
You know? And it's weird it's interesting and I would guess this is true for a lot of creative people that... we come to the table. I think a lot of people probably have, there's something that they is a companion in some way.
Right.
And in that sort of diagnosis or sort of wrestling with it, which often makes people feel like an outsider, right? And even the language can do that.
Right.
Distance people from the club.
Sure.
There can be that sort of trajectory of, relief. Okay, I get it. And then maybe some shame or regret. Why didn't I know earlier?
Sure.
And I would love to end on, because, we're in a good climate of a culture sort of being more aware and interested in being inclusive and how do we work with these things rather than sort of distance. For creative people finding themselves with these things that have historically been sort of incorrectly labeled as a challenge or limitation, what are some healthy things that you do to work with this as a companion, and specifically how do you kind of channel it to get the creative results that you do? Oh,
well, dyslexia is an interesting one. I can't talk about the other things,
no, sure.
but dyslexia is interesting because it couldn't be further from being a disability. So the way I think about dyslexia is like this. Here's the deal with dyslexia. It can show up in a lot of different ways, but often it's a problem with reading and writing. It's an interesting thing to call it a disability. Here's why. In the natural world, before reading and writing, dyslexia would not show up as a disability. It would just show up as another way of solving problems, right? Dyslexics are very good at taking patterns and seeing patterns. Dyslexics are very good at taking ideas that other people would not combine and going, this is like this, because dyslexics have long connectors in their brain that allow them to exchange information between one part and another part of their brain very easily. So they make these connections that other people don't make, right? So in a pre-literate society, it would just show up as you'd have a better way to kill buffalo or whatever, right? And so we create a system, reading and writing. We created that system. So to say, oh, this person has a disability, they can't use this system. It's like, no, it's a flaw in the system, not a flaw in the brain of the person.
Right.
We created an imperfect system, and now we're judging people by that system.
I follow you, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the reason I say it couldn't be further from a disability is when you look at the people who've had it, including Thomas Edison, Da Vinci, Walt Disney, John Lennon, Agatha Christie, Einstein, Picasso, disability?
Right.
Right? And some people think, oh, they overcame this thing to achieve things. It's like, it's not overcoming it. It is the way you perceive.
Yeah.
And so you are that person because you have dyslexia. You're not overcoming anything. And you're not embracing anything either. You can't help but perceive that way. That's the way your brain operates.
You're working with it.
Yeah, it's just the way your brain operates.
Yeah.
And so it just operates differently. But it's not wrong. There's no evidence to support that idea, right? That it's wrong. It's just different.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, it's a good place for us to end, because that brings us back around to, I think, our first question about fear, but this idea that we're always going to have companions, whether it's, something diagnosable or something that we sort of put on ourselves. Maybe it's fear or some circumstantial thing of like, I don't have the time,
Sure.
I have really fragmented pieces of time in my week to write because I'm hustling with whatever
Sure.
demand we have. But that, the sort of cultural takeaway that we would often have is, I'm not going to arrive until I'm over all that stuff.
Right.
And I'm in this like weird hermetically sealed vacuum where I just do awesome.
Right.
And I like what we've been talking about today, which is like, it is sort of, as you said, not necessarily embracing, but it's acceptance of like, you will have companions. There's going to be things that,
Right.
whatever yours are, there might
Right.
be 1 or 3, but like, don't let that stop you if you're a storyteller from continuing on the journey of creating stories.
And all those things are human. And
Right.
so you just tap into them and use them, because the more human your stories are, the better they're going to be.
Right. And you're not the only one. Like everybody, as the examples you've given, right?
Yeah.
Like the greats in every field you can imagine, had, in this instance, dyslexia.
Steve Jobs, I forgot him.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty crazy. It's a crazy list.
Yeah. And it's easy, again, with this thing of like, how we sort of present a polished version online or something like that. It's easy to do the idealized thing of, I guess everybody's super evolved now and has no issues. And
Right.
meanwhile, I know I'm struggling with fear and I can't finish my story. And so it's nice to have those examples of, no, we all have human components.
Yeah.
And they're coming with us, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Use them.
Yeah. Cool, Brian.
All right.
Thanks for the episode.
Thank you.
On next week's episode of You Are a Storyteller,
It's just on the surface if it doesn't scare you a little bit to put it down. And that's frightening. But if you are following principles that you know work, that's really all you can do. Right? And if you are using them to tell an emotional truth, if it scares you a little bit, then you should probably write it down.
thanks for watching You Are a Storyteller. If you have any questions or there's a storytelling topic you want us to cover, leave a comment below or email us at hello@believeagency.com.